Dali places Jesus the Christ in the middle of the painting with his head held high and a gesture pointing upwards as if to say to Rome that if you strike me down, you dig your own grave, because what I represent, the divine spirit of humanity, the spirit that is the heart of civilization, is the strength of the human fabric. If you deny that, then you doom yourself to a more certain demise than your worst enemies could ever inflict upon you. And so Rome, heeding not the warning, did fall by its own decadence. It appears that Dali recognized that no one had heard what Jesus the Christ might have said. Rome evidently hadn't heard it, and Christianity hadn't either. Even his disciples hadn't. And so, as history records, a string of dark ages of imperial terror erupted that still continues in the world today in numerous different forms, including the religion of global warming. As if to raise the bar, to get society out of its entrapment, Dali placed a super-large symbol of humanity high above the entire scene. He appears to say to us, if you lose sight of the essence of humanity, the very Christ idea as expressed in truth and in the universal brotherhood of humanity, that is an element of truth, that is the essence of love and truth, and so on, you doom yourself and your future more horribly than your worst enemy ever could. The abrupt disappearance of worker bees from the beehives of the European honeybee colonies occurred closely in time following the massive poisoning of the air, primarily in the Northern Hemisphere where the DU wars were staged in Iraq and Afghanistan. The worker bees spent most of their life in the air, as do all insects and birds, which are also declining. In addition, we have seen exotic new diseases emerging in the post-DU war era, such as the Morgellons fiber disease and the bird flu. While the global warming doctrine terrifies humanity with a climate catastrophe that is pure myth, it hides the catastrophic impact of war, such as that of the DU wars. We need to make a distinction between the impact of empire on the natural world and the impact of humanity. Empire is the driver for war, especially nuclear war. 2 atom bombs were dropped in 1945 to terrorize the world with the new weapon. Over 2,000 bombs were tested in the decades thereafter, nearly half of that in the atmosphere. The damage to humanity was so horrific that the tests were forced underground, which was later banned as well. All of this was forced by the terror doctrine. Billions of tons of radioactive fallout from the 1,000 bomb tests are still polluting the environment and will continue to do so for a long time to come. The declines in the populations of amphibians that is now more than 200-fold above the historic background may well be the result of the processes of war that the masters of empire demand as a means for maintaining their dominance over humanity. That's terror in reality, not fictional terror. This real but hidden terror is about to be increased 100-fold. In all the DU wars to date, from the Gulf War in 1991 to the occupation of Iraq after 2003, roughly 5,000 tons of uranium has been vaporized into the air. It was reported by Korea Times in 2005 that in South Korea alone 2.7 million uranium bombs and munitions have been post-positioned according to 2003 figures released under the Freedom of Information Act. The stockpile is estimated to contain 67,000 tons of uranium. Since then, the war cries have increased. With Iran added as a major target, the pre-positioned stockpile may be 100 times greater than the historic DU weapons used to date. A 100-fold increase in the radioactive poisoning of the world would likely push the human and the general biological environment far beyond the point of no return. The jet streams assure the hemispheric distribution of the DU warfare poison and eventually the worldwide distribution. This feature is not overlooked, but is evidently incorporated in the war plans. The masters of empire have been crying for worldwide depopulation since the 1790s, when the USA was formed in opposition to the system of empire. The depopulation policy was forged from this time on as a weapon against the advance of humanity. The DU warfare plays into this game. Of course, the depopulation doctrine also justifies slavery and the staging of famine. Once a people are labeled as excess, inhumanity becomes automatic, and the game justifies the means. The depopulation doctrine of empire emerged from the carrying capacity myth that was started in Venice and quickly became the guiding ideology of the British Empire through the 1800s to the present. The advanced form of the doctrine now demands the world population to be reduced to below the 1 billion mark. The evidently intended worldwide pollution of the environment resulting from DU warfare will likely push the depopulation of our planet far beyond the intended goal of the 6 billion reduction of the human population. On the platform of empire, terror is a visible policy for fulfilling hidden sinister intentions. The global warming terror fits into this category as a visible element of the depopulation intention by hiding the return of the Ice Age that may have already begun. Venice, the financier of the medieval Crusades, was a champion of the process of open terror and hidden intention. The masters of Venice, who became famous for their inhumanity and rule by the terror of the execution, had their roots so far outside the natural platform of humanity that they had to build their city isolated from the normal world on some far-off shore mudflats in the Adriatic Sea. Though some effects may not always be intended, we see a type of scorched earth policy unfolding all over the place on a gigantic scale, a type of policy that echoes the endgame that Adolf Hitler had ordered in his last moments in World War II just before he killed himself. He had ordered the complete destruction of Germany's infrastructures, such as bridges, railways, and communication systems. Fortunately, his generals did not comply. At least a few had enough human patriotism left in their hearts. However, today one finds far too little of this patriotism left in society after the numerous terror operations have left their mark, such as the global warming doctrine. It is unknown what in today's world the final response will be as the modern endgame plays out. After 5 decades of increasing terror, much of it subliminal in nature, the response in society has become soft and its patriotism thin. The global warming terror played a large role in the general regression of patriotism. The kind of warfare that is unfolding in the context of oligarchy and empire, a warfare beyond war, even sanitized as just nuclear war, makes absolutely no sense to any rational human being. Still, one should not be surprised when nuclear war in its worst form suddenly appears as a component in the endgame commanded from the castles of oligarchic power and long-term cultural degeneracy, where the masters are crying for depopulation. Yielding to such inhumanity instead of opposing it, society has thereby increased its vulnerability, while empire itself has become trapped in a similar manner. In the context of a normal humanity, the terror of nuclear war is not possible or even thinkable, but in the context of the culture of empire, nuclear war is just another game for a purpose and will be so pursued if the purpose requires it. The actions and reactions resulting from this long train of humanist degeneration have forged a culture that has become totally alien in human terms. The system of oligarchy and empire has a deep anti-human root that goes back into time almost 5,000 years and has many facets. Empire has become a culture to itself, an anti-human culture, a fascist culture that arose from the early oligarchic empires, such as the Aryan in India, the Persian Empire in the Middle East, and many others, followed by the Roman Empire, the Venetian Empire, and at last the British Empire that grew out of it. The higher an oligarchy sets itself above humanity, the more alien and inhuman it becomes, and the more it sets itself apart from civilization, whereby its own demise is ultimately assured. Human happiness and human needs are not factors of concern in the courts of the high-minded, of the oligarchs and empire. This is well evident in the long history of terrorism that came out of those courts. Or, as Bertrand Russell has put it, really high-minded people are indifferent to happiness, especially other people's. Against this background, no horror should come as a surprise, though the horrors of war usually do start as a surprise, as the great games typically are forged in secrecy. World War I was not generally predicted. In the spring of 1914, anyone who suggested that a major war was on the horizon would have been laughed at. Only those who understood the culture of empire would not have laughed, and those were few. Even as it started, the conflict was deemed to be a short one. Some saw it as a vacation. No, war wasn't designed to be a holiday. It was designed to be a cacophony of horrors that would not end. Nuclear war can happen suddenly if the intention is to go for it. It is a simple process to trigger nuclear war. The infrastructures have been created long ago and have been largely automated. The process may be started in the cold secrecy of moments of insanity which, when started, cannot likely be stopped. When nuclear war starts, it unfolds fast. It could all happen in the span of a lunch break, while you sit at the pool drinking tea, or in the space of a few hours at the most, with consequences that are incomprehensible and will be extending forever. Consequences on a scale that few can comprehend, and fewer will survive. Who can comprehend the incomprehensible?
I was happy by the river, remembered the child before it died. I was singing, climbing on rocks, playing, laughing, chasing a squirrel. I watched the beetles sleeping. I watched a rabbit under a bridge. Then fire came with a bright light. The forest was burning with screams. There was no more sky. There was night. Not a voice.
A real nuclear war has never been experienced in the history of civilization, or even a world war by the present generation, with a few exceptions. However, for as long as the system of empire remains in operation, nuclear war will be our fate. It cannot then be avoided. Inhumanity and war is the culture developed in the courts of empire. However, society can gain its freedom from it and its security by closing down the courts of empire with the power of its humanity. In the post-war decades, all the wars in general experience were just small-scale skirmishes for limited objectives. One of these was the Vietnam War, the first of the modern variety of the pure terror wars. In general perception, the Vietnam War was lost by the West. Under the terms of empire, however, the war was not lost. It had fulfilled its objective. The war had rendered the USA a broken nation, with a wound in its human heart and soul and its economy torn, from which it has not yet recovered. However, under the general terms of empire wars, the purpose for war never ends. The wars merely change phase. There is no end to the sacrifices that empire demands of humanity. In the wake of the military terror success that the Vietnam War had been, even while the peace process was still in progress, a new form of terror was unleashed in the background in 1974. In 1974, a phase change began. It began the global warming terror that was evidently designed to serve as a higher-level stage for a still more powerful type of terror that was focused on all that is human, even human life itself, and human activity, and society's power to develop itself. These became the villain, and as if this was not enough, a formal campaign was begun under the U.S. NSSM 200 policy to promote the depopulation of the planet, beginning with the Third World nations. That the global warming doctrine was designed from the beginning to serve this new platform for terror is evident by the arrogant proclamation under the dogma that 80% of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere were added after 1940, and that a 60 to 80% worldwide reduction in the consumption of fossil fuels is therefore required to save the Earth, regardless of the consequences. On a per capita basis, when applied to the USA, the doctrine would require the elimination of 90 to 95% of the nation's energy use. Energy is what every form of economic activity and human living itself depends on. Under the new doctrine, this foundation for civilization is to be scrapped. The raw earth became the deity of a new religion. Russia's Academy of Science has called the Kyoto Protocol that resulted from the global warming doctrine a global suicide pact. Enormous pressure has been brought on all the nations in the world to comply with this suicide pact, though it has absolutely no scientific imperative standing behind it. Thus, evermore the global warming doctrine comes to light as having been designed as a terror scheme with a terrible bite, a type of nuclear war scheme against all economic activity and development, and thus against human living itself. The only element that has not been unaffected by the global warming doctrine is the climate itself that is getting colder. The masters of empire have progressed a long way since the days of the Roman circuses, where terror became a ruling element with the rising of the empire. But the masters of Rome, too, couldn't escape reality. The historic torture-terror schemes, whatever they had been throughout the ages, though impressive at time in their madness, have never produced any lasting profit for the masters of oligarchic power. The torture-terror schemes always collapse the society whose oligarchy practices them. This truth was already evident in Rome, where the intended victim of the terror of torture was society itself. The victims being tortured were merely convenient collateral, a readily available means to an end. This was the same role that Vietnam was forced to play in our time, which saw 2 million of its people murdered in the process. It was also the role the USA had been forced to play in this process for its self-destruction from within. Torture is still applied to victimized society as in historic times. The victims still fall by the wayside. In the case of the CIA's worldwide network of torture prisons, the intention was to terrorize society into compliance rather than to collect information, which is unreliable, as everyone knows, or to force confession that is meaningless when forced. Under the global warming dogma, the terror process has been expanded. It has been driven forward to a level of subliminal force by which society achieved its own near-complete self-terrorization and self-victimization as the intended victim of the plot for the purpose of its inner self-destruction. In ancient times, Jesus Christ had labored to heal the self-victimization of society. He had labored to free it from the oligarchic dogmas and controlling force, and to start a new era of spiritual freedom. This option remains still open to us today, though society stands far from it. Nevertheless, the process that is involved is simple. The key to civilization is the principle of universal love expressed in universal brotherhood. Whether we manage to shut down empire before its nuclear war erupts, and so survive, and thereby survive the Ice Age transition that is already in process, depends on our success on the front of the principle of universal love. The principle of universal love may seem alien in today's world where the media and entertainment is saturated with killing and looting and profiteering. Nevertheless, it remains the foundation of human civilization. The principle of universal love seems alien today because the degenerating culture of empire has deeply infected the culture of society. In the culture of empire, the very notion of universal love is heresy. The historic periods of Renaissance occurred only in times when the culture of empire and its heresy had collapsed itself for a season. But it shouldn't be that way. Love for one another and for our humanity should be the driver for civilization, by which empire and oligarchism lose their ground and fall away. In historic terms, humanity has collapsed itself a long way by allowing itself to become infected with the culture of empire that had infested many cultures. The resulting trend still endangers civilization, and more than that, it has reached a critical stage in modern time. On the war front, society has already progressed far past the point where war and economic looting can be tolerated. The effects of the degenerated culture have become so destructive and genocidal that they threaten the extinction of civilization and possibly humanity with it. But this trend can be reversed again by society digging deeper to rediscover its soul and humanity, which had happened once before, a long time ago, in 1648. We really have no option left open to us but to go back to the principle of universal love that was once faintly exemplified in the Peace of Westphalia that had ended almost 100 years of war in 1648. Many factors have contributed to the Peace of Westphalia that had shut down a century of war. One factor may have been the recognition that the masters of oligarchy are criminals and liars. This may have been the final straw that tipped the balance during the suffering in those days. The Susanna story in the biblical book Daniel 13 unmasks the rotten nature of the oligarchy and its system as a citadel of lies, and illustrates the power of the human spirit to overrule it. Two elders had invaded Susanna's house one night while she was bathing, demanding sex, which she refused. They threatened to accuse her of adultery that carried the death sentence. As she still refused, they carried out their threat. But in defending her, Daniel uncovered their lies. It is a simple story. When Rembrandt made a painting of it in the shadow of the 30 Years' War, the oligarchy stood accused, unmasked, and powerless. The Rembrandt-type intersection is needed again as a call for truth, because the world's political scene has become once again a citadel of lies. The nations of Iraq and Afghanistan were destroyed on the basis of lies. Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. The scare was based on lies. The 9/11 terror is now known to have been financed and organized by the oligarchy of empire itself. Afghanistan was destroyed as a whipping boy on the basis of lies. The oligarchy also stands accused as liars on the front of the global warming scare, on which hundreds of millions have been killed. The war drive against Iran, too, is based on lies, lies fabricated to support other lies, and the list goes on. These few examples are just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, much of which remains unseen. The book of Daniel 13 has since been banned in order to protect the citadel of lies, but the Treaty of Westphalia, that is essentially a treaty of humanity with itself in defense of its humanity, still stands, precarious as this may be, with the foundation for civilization now under constant attack. The Treaty of Westphalia stands to the present day as the only peace treaty in history that has left no one vanquished. The gem of peace was recognized as something so precious that it ended all warfare for nearly half a decade. We need to get back to a foundation that is true. the underlying foundation of the Treaty of Westphalia is the principle of universal love. It appears to be our only hope in the modern age. Without it, none of the current problems can be solved. At best, solutions are attempted with band-aid measures that hide the rot underneath. We must not fail to rise above the mud of today's empire-torn landscape of lies. But why should we fail on the front of the principle of love? We have the greatest power on earth in our pocket, which is our divine quality as human beings, which the principle of universal love is merely an expression of. The principle of universal love may seem challenging indeed in its imperatives, but it appears to be challenging only against the oligarchic background where reality is turned upside down and society divided and trapped into its own ice age in the heart, hanging its head low. But this isn't reality. Reality is so wide that for all practical purposes the human unfolding appears to have just begun. In order to explore the principle of universal love, of a society not divided and isolated and at war with one another, but bound to its humanity, a series of 12 novels has been written with a single story that threads through many stages and challenging aspects that today's cultural dogmas would render alien. The series, The Lodging for the Rose, puts a challenge before us, especially in the social domain, to go back to the basics of fundamental humanity, as strange as such a proposition may seem. One of the novels of the series includes a poem that has to do with the going to the core of what is and moving forward to enrich the world. The title of the poem is Harvest is Seed Time.
Seeds wind-blown, carriers of a secret still unknown, poems in the words of nature, sentinels of an intelligence yet unseen, prophets of the enduring, apostles in an endless landscape. Harvest is seed time, thoughts ripening, carried as by a great wind, carriers of secrets to unfold, thoughts winged with purpose, a force silent, patiently waiting for the moment. Thoughts do awaken, roused by the moist warmth in spring, cascades of colors, colors of life, bright yellows, bursts of silver white, thoughts becoming creations, monuments of genius, builders of worlds. Who owns the seeds? Do we? Who can fathom their wonder? Life flows from them in great rivers, rivers trailing into oceans. In them we are alone. Each one is alone. Each thought is sovereign. Beauty is its song. Thoughts are seeds becoming ideas, alive in discovering, alive in listening, alive in being touched by love, alive in loving, alive. Like seeds, thoughts fall to the ground. Potentials are lost. Hard ground kills the precious. But we are men. Hard ground becomes tilled, watered, The precious is nurtured in loving. Love for one another, the human spring. Mankind is afloat in a sea that is love. Seeds germinate, become plants. Roots break the ground. Love lifts the barriers, patiently, silently waiting, reaching for the sky. Thoughts are the universe unfolding, landscapes of brilliance, ideas of power, substance for enriching one another, substance of the forever maturing, thoughts bearing new seeds within, seeds for splendors beyond dreams. Each harvest is seed time. A seed becomes a plant bearing new seeds. A thought unfolding bears up civilization. A spark in the heart bears the fire of life. New worlds are created in the fire of passion. We are the bearers of a fire that is light. Builders of worlds are we, new worlds which have never been, precious with riches, grander than our own. Nature is love reflected in loving. Love paints the colors of its endless spring. Love paints us all, but who owns the seed? Who owns the cradle for the seed? Name it intelligence, name it the universe. Thoughts are seeds from an infinite fountain, monuments of grandeur of good, fields of flowers dancing in the sunshine. All nature whispers this to us. The melody of nature, what a song! Whispers of a splendor grander than the heavens. Like seeds are we whisper too. Seeds bearing gifts for the world. Gifts wrapped up in sunshine. Gems are we, unfolding a majestic song. Listen to the song, listen to the heart, listen to the silence where the strands of love unfold. Listen to the symphony of our humanity. In this symphony we are one, one with the universe itself. Is Salvador Dali saying to us with the superimposed image that seems to represent the Christ in all humanity, the very essence of humanity that hovers above the entire human world scene, the very essence of being human and divine. And you make an effort, as I have done, to project that essence that defines us all, which is the essence of truth and love, the very essence of civilization. Then you create for yourself a world that will be brighter than anything that you can yet imagine in your tallest dreaming. Yes, seeds are we, wind-blown, carriers of secrets to be known, seeds afloat in a sea that is love, seeds for splendors beyond the heavens above, seeds bearing gifts for the world. Oh, listen to the symphony of our humanity. Listen to the grandeur of the heart. Oh, what a song!